Well, here we go again. In this video, I will be responding to yet another person trying to shit on a video game before it's even out. Now, I'm going to assume everyone watching this video is well aware of what Bendy and the Ink Machine is, and probably saw the Bendy and the Dark Revival trailer that released a few days ago, that is, as of recording this segment. Now, I don't know when this video will come out, but I will try to complete it all in one day, so let's see how that goes. Anyways, the title of this video is Bendy and the Lazy Sequel, and comes from Theft King. Now, if you've been around on this channel for a while, you may remember that I already covered Theft King in a previous video, when he was in some drama with a FNAF fanverse developer. And while he did manage to take the L and move on that whole situation, he is now back with some bad takes. I feel like there is something to be said in general with people and shitting on video games before they're even out. Criticizing a game for its real flaws is one thing, however, labeling a game as bad or lazy outright is just entirely stupid. Alright, well, I feel like this has gone on long enough, so in the interest of not killing you with boredom, let's get right into this shit.
Bendy and the Ink Machine is one of the most visually striking games made in the last decade. It's gorgeous. Bendy and the Dark Revival looks...
Okay, this clip got me confused, simply because this is a clip from Bendy and the Ink Machine, the prequel to the Dark Revival. So I can take this as either him trying to imply that the game has been butchered, or him trying to pass it off as Dark Revival footage. In the interest of being fair, I'll go with the former.
Is that the player's hand? It looks like Nintendo 64.
No, actually that is the Piper's hand, but sure, the model could be better.
Why does the ink look like drool?
It literally looks the same as it looked in the Ink Machine. I don't know if you noticed this, but the ink on these creatures has always been portrayed as being more on the slimy side. But no, let's ignore that and nitpick the ink in the new game for staying true to the original, because why the fuck not?
What's going on with her arms? Bendy and the Dark Revival looks the same as the first game. The characters, the environments, the ink, all of it.
Okay guys, you just saw a bit of the Dark Revival footage thus far. Now, if you've played the first game, tell me this. Do all these characters appear in the first game? Yeah, that's right, they fucking don't. The only character seen so far that was in the Ink Machine was the Piper. And the environment is the same because it's the same fucking location. Wow, mind fucking blown. Not to mention, at the very beginning of the trailer, we'll literally see a segment of the environment before the Ink Machine took over. But no guys, it's all the same environment. Not only that, the visuals have been upgraded from the first game. Just look at the new Alice and Angel model in the Dark Revival.
This is Bendy and the Ink Machine in 2K, and this is the Dark Revival trailer in HD. After 5 years, the long-awaited follow-up to one of the most popular indie horror games ever looks like a marginally improved reshade of the original game with slightly more detail in the environments? Really?
I mean, what else did you expect? You yourself said that the original game had a gorgeous art style, and now you're bitching about them keeping the exact same art style that you praised and improving on it. Seriously, if this isn't one of the biggest reaches I've heard in a while, then I'm fucking Santa Claus.
Bendy and the Dark Revival is actually coming. Like soon. The game is gonna be out on PC in 2 weeks.
I'm just curious, how many more intros will we have? We're at what now, 3?
Naturally, a trailer was released, and like its predecessor, the game utilizes a hyper-stylized, cartoony aesthetic. It's certainly very striking, and don't get me wrong, the game looks really promising. Bendy and the Dark Revival looks the same as the first game.
Bruh, make up your fucking mind. Does it having the same aesthetic from the first game bother you or not? We're not even a minute in, and this guy already contradicted himself.
I am excited to play it. However, I have some reservations. I've always felt that Bendy and the Ink Machine suffered from its episodic release format, and that the individual chapters were actually greater than the game in its totality. Kindly Beast started out like any other indie developer, and they couldn't afford to make all of Bendy at once. Thus, they carved the game into the chapters we now know, and sold them as they came out in an episodic release model. However, in my opinion, playing all of them at once reveals just how monotonous and repetitive Bendy's environments and gameplay are. In contrast, The Dark Revival appears to be a singular, standalone game, and I'm optimistic that perhaps the pacing and overall experience could be a lot better as a result. Just like I'm hoping you'll hit the subscribe button. Watching the trailer though, I couldn't help but notice that visually the game looked very similar to Bendy and the Ink Machine. It looks almost exactly the same.
Damn bro, it's almost like the art style is the fucking same. Holy shit. Who would have known that two games with the same art style and the same setting will look very similar? Crazy, right? I really don't see anything wrong with them sticking with the same art style and working on improving it, instead of ditching it just for the sake of being different.
There's obviously a bigger budget for character models, more detailed set pieces, more voice acting and animated cutscenes, but...
But what? That makes it almost the exact same? You literally describe every way that it is different, yet you still claim that there is almost no difference. At this point, I'm seriously wondering if this video is just hate bait, since he wanted to capitalize on the sudden explosion that the trailer caused.
Looking at the environments, the game doesn't look that much more impressive. Bendy's hyper-stylized aesthetic, where everything looks like it's an old Max Fleischer cartoon, is still really cool and pretty, but we've seen it before, and I was really hoping that the Bendy sequel would knock our socks off again with something as unique and interesting as the cartoon aesthetic was 5 years ago.
So here's where the problem arises. He wants them to reinvent the wheel and be different just for the sake of being different. And spoiler alert, they tried that with Showdown Bandit, and yeah, that didn't work out so well for them. So they are sticking with Bendy, and it's no one's fault but your own that you expected this game to be something it's not and never was.
There's obviously a lot more detail in these areas, and that's appreciated. For example, the Heavenly Toys area has some more props and stuff, and it looks good, but that area looked great in the first game already.
So I guess now they're not allowed to change areas that already looked good? What in the actual fuck is this video?
I feel like it wouldn't be that hard to add a few ripped up banners and some extra props for detail and get it looking nearly as good as what they showed in the trailer. They were obviously able to spend more time on these areas in Dark Revival, and that's what's most important, but considering the crazy technological advances we've seen in the last few years, I'm quite underwhelmed by what the game has shown so far, especially in comparison to the first game.
Here we see it once again. Them improving the visuals is not enough because this guy set his expectations so unreasonably high, he probably grabbed a rock from the moon. Now, in the next segment he talks about how the visuals can get stale, which is entirely subjective, so I'm just going to fast forward it.
Make no mistake, the lighting and detail does look better. In particular, some of the enemies look great. However, some of the character models look... this thing doesn't look very good. Is that supposed to be like ink skin on her arms, or is it a dress, or it just looks weird? We have what appears to be Alice Angel, and while the model has more detail than in the first game, she doesn't look that much better.
Literally fucking how? It definitely looks miles better than in the first game, especially with the new lighting, which helps out a ton.
Especially when it comes to how the character is lit. I think this is one of the core weaknesses of Bendy's aesthetic. A lot of the detail is done using textures and neat shading tricks rather than actual geometry, and this gives Bendy its unique look, but it doesn't look as striking as it did 5 years ago.
Do I even bother responding to this?
To me, it feels like, oh, this again? We are teased with what appear to be some outdoor segments, which initially got me very excited. The first game takes place entirely indoors, and thus there just isn't a ton of environmental variety.
Which is literally what you bitched about regarding this game. But now that there is variety, he's going to downplay it.
Even when we finally do get some in the final chapter, it's just a cave. We went from a brown office to a brown cave. Great. However, looking closer at this scene, it also looks like everything else in Bendy does. It looks very similar to the area before the carousel boss. Also, look at this car. It doesn't look very good. It doesn't look that much different from the first game.
Because the fucking art style is the same, dipshit.
It's tricky because you can't simply up the poly count to make a game like Bendy look better. The game derives its aesthetic from these very flat, plain textured objects with thick outlines, and adding too much detail takes away from that. We can really see this in the ink. In the first game, the ink was incredibly shiny and reflective, which looked okay. It's very early Xbox release shiny, but it holds up decently. Unfortunately, Dark Revival uses the exact same look for the ink, and that's kind of a bummer.
I mean, if it ain't broke, why fix it?
The ink itself is like a character in Bendy, and I was really hoping that they'd spend more time in the sequel making it look fantastic. It still looks like shiny metal instead of drippy ink. This dude looks like a mold monster from Resident Evil 7. This dude dissolves into like an explosion of light or something. It just doesn't look that great.
If you took a shot for every time you can bring up the art style to shut down this guy's points, you'd probably be dead. So I won't keep repeating myself since that would probably kill you guys too. Also, the reason that guy dissolves into light is because of the main character's power. You know, one of the new gameplay features that I would expect you to know about.
Even the protagonist's arms, which in a first-person game you'd think they'd spend the most time on, look pretty janky. The right hand looks great, and the splotches of ink are exactly the kind of thing that I was hoping to see more of. However, the left hand just looks like a generic monster hand. It doesn't even really look like ink.
So before, we were bitching about how the ink in this game doesn't look like real ink, and now we're bitching about how the arm made entirely out of that not real ink also doesn't look real. Like, for fuck's sake, man. No shit, if the ink doesn't look like real ink, then the objects made out of fake ink won't look like real ink either. I also hope that this guy realizes that real ink is actually reflective. It's not a gateway to the fucking abyss.
Furthermore, there's all sorts of weird seams on the forearm, and they reflect the light back in a really weird way. This happened in the first game too, and it's a shame that more time wasn't spent upgrading the look of the ink. It's the follow-up to Bendy and the ink machine. It's kind of important that the ink looks good. Comparing the enemies, the models definitely look a lot better in Dark Revival. In particular, the enemies that aren't just ink blobs seem to have a lot of neat design flourishes. The shiny ink actually looks good as it oozes out of this monster's mouth.
So, does it look good or not? Make up your fucking mind.
Maybe that's the problem. The ink looks too much like spit. That's probably why it looks good here. Still, I have to draw your attention to the player character's hand, which looks like Nintendo 64. Did they seriously think that looked good enough to be trailer worthy? Come on.
Okay, now he's just being disingenuous. He literally showed the player's hands earlier, and now he's pretending like he doesn't know that this is the Piper's hand. I mean, if you couldn't make that conclusion by just comparing the player's hands to the Piper's hands, there's also the fact that the animations for the hand correspond to the animations for the Piper trying to pry the door open. I'm convinced at this point that this guy is purposefully bitching about non-issues just to capitalize on the trailer dropping. Like, sure, do it, I don't care, but be fucking honest, dude, it's not that hard.
Don't get me wrong, I'm cautiously optimistic for Bendy in the Dark Revival, and I'll be playing it when it comes out. I hope it's good. I'm spending my money on it just like everyone else. There are a lot of controversies surrounding the developers and their studio, lawsuits, etc., but none of that really matters to me when evaluating the quality of the game itself. If it's good, even if the people who make it are assholes. There's also like a mini controversy regarding the Dark Revival trailer being incredibly akin to that of BioShock, but I don't think this is that big a deal. Bendy has always been heavily inspired by BioShock, and frankly, I don't care if games copy good ideas from each other. Call me selfish, but as long as the result is us getting more cool games, who cares if developers lift each other's ideas? So yeah, Bendy's presentation and sequences are obviously highly derivative of BioShock, so what? Ultimately, looks are not everything, and like its predecessor, Dark Revival certainly appears to be a very sharp-looking, stylish game. However, we've seen this before, and I can't help but feel that rehashing the exact same aesthetic diminishes a lot of what made Bendy so hype in the first place.
Because there wasn't anything like it before. Of course, the Dark Revival is not going to feel as fresh, and it never advertised itself as something new and groundbreaking. So once again, this is your fault for expecting it to be something it's not.
The original game's look is so iconic and has become so timeless, it will probably always look good, similar to other stylized games like Wind Waker.
And that just proves that this entire thing has been completely fucking pointless.
The downside is, the trick doesn't work twice. Bendy in the Dark Revival looks just as cool as its predecessor, but I don't really see how it could ever substantially top the first game without completely abandoning its aesthetic. It would have to do something new entirely, and at that point, would it even feel like Bendy? We're left with an incremental upgrade that looks better than Bendy did when it released 5 years ago, but it's just not as exciting as it was back then.
Okay, I'm not going to repeat myself again.
I hope it's good though. Thanks for watching.
You need some help. Don't touch me. Above everything else, stay away from the ink demon.
What's an ink demon?
It's a car that Mike Mood bought.
And with that, we are finally done with this absolute mess of a video. So I guess the takeaway here is Bendy and the Dark Revival bad, because this guy doesn't want them to reuse the art style. Funnily enough, I had planned to make a whole different video today, but then this landed in my lap and I just couldn't say no, so here we are now. Be sure to like and subscribe to boost me in the algorithm. Thank you for watching and I'll see you next time.